Okay, Boker Tov, everybody. Let's mute. 1 second. Yes. Okay. We learned today the Ili Nishmat Avigdor Chai Avram and Meir Tzvi Rachalea, Shamash Eben Aliyah. This is a monumental day. This is a big day today because we're actually finally, after I think 14 classes, finishing chapter 11. Maybe. No, we will. We will. We are on page 82 in the small version, but right near, like 2 paragraphs from the end of the chapter, which starts with the words Klal HaDevarim. The general rule is, okay, Klal HaDevarim. Again, as we come to the conclusion of this chapter of Parak Yud Aleph, chapter 11, of Nikiyut, where we are trying to not only sur meirav aseh tov, to not do the wrong things, which was the zehirut, and to do the right things, which was zrizut, but to really cleanse ourselves of anything that could be even closely remotely related to doing something wrong. He gave dozens and dozens of examples, and he gave many ideas that we were able to really think about and start to maybe even to incorporate in our lives. And this is the end of this chapter. He's going to not only summarize, but give us a little bit of encouragement. Klal HaDvarim, the general rule is as follows. Hakavod hu, for right now, sorry, before we get to the summaries, we have to finish the topic of kavod. We talked last week about kavod, how honor, the need. Again, we're not talking about respect and self-respect. Everyone wants to be respected. Everyone wants to have their own, hopefully have self-respect and respect themselves. But it's the need to feel important, the need to ask for kavod, for someone to have to show, they deign you with their gratitude all the time, whatever it might be. General rules as follows. Hakavod hu min hamichshalot hayoter gedolim sher le'adam. Kavod, seeking out kavod, is one of the greatest pitfalls for a person. And why? Not just because it's just not nice. Why? It's impossibly a true Eved Hashem to your creator. While you're focused on your own kavod, what are you doing? You're diminishing the kavod and pushing away the kavod for God. You can't have both at the same exact time. Because while you're focused on your own kavod, what you're doing is you're diminishing the kavod shamayim because of your foolishness. And we do lots of things in our lives that are foolish. I have absolutely 100% said to myself on numerous occasions, you're an idiot. What are you doing? I hear my dad's voice resonating sometimes in my head. He didn't call me an idiot, he called me something else.
Others say
huh?
No, but this is the person who's the idiot, it's what they did.
Correct. I may hate the sin, but never the sinner. Except in my case, it's both. I'm just joking. It was a foolish act, okay? Whether it's something was in traffic or in a store, writing something, posting something, whatever it might be, and I'm not talking about being my own worst critic. That's okay. That's fine. You're allowed to look at your own work, whether it's something you've done artistically or whatever it might be, and to say, well, I missed this, I didn't do this right. That's fine. Because it makes, if the point is not self-deprecation, but to grow and to learn from it, like, look, I missed this. No one's going to really care, but I know it's there. Okay, you want to grow from that. But the seeking out of kavod at that same time, what's happening is you're diminishing that moment from being able to give kavod to Hashem. Now, that doesn't mean we walk around all day going, hey, God is great. Got to respect God all the time. We don't do that necessarily, but we do it through our actions, the way we live through Shulchan Aruch. That goes back to the question of, I probably posed it here once before, why is it that we say in the morning, the bracha for Birchot HaTorah is la'asok b'divrei Torah? That's Nusach Ashkenaz, says la'asok b'divrei Torah. I say al divrei Torah. It's a different Nusach, but why do you mean, why don't we just say, Baruch Hashem lakina mechem asher kidishanu mitztav tzivanu lilmod Torah, or lilmod u'lilamed Torah, right? What does it mean la'asok b'divrei Torah? It means to be involved in Torah. It means that even when I'm not actually sitting and learning Torah, my life is guided by Torah. I make my decisions based on Torah. I have to make sure I live ethically. I have to make sure I live al pi Shulchan Aruch. And if I'm too busy, asuk, with my own kavod, I have directly, not indirectly, I've directly minimized and detracted from the Kavod Hashem. Zehu ma she'amar David al Melech alav shalom. We're near the end of the chapter. This is what David HaMelech said. Unkaloti od mizot, vayiti shafal be'einai. David HaMelech, not in a self-deprecating way, but in a very serious way, he saw himself as being lower. He doesn't need the kavod. He's the melech. By the way, a melech, shemachala kodo en kodo machul, which means a melech who said, no, you don't have to get up for me. He can't do that. A Rav can say it. A parent can say it. People of whatever you might give kavod to, he's allowed to say, no, it's okay. A melech can't do that. But the way he saw himself, David, was in a position that he understood that not relative to the people, but relative to Hashem. Like, who am I? Yes, I can't hear you. Why may not a melech? Okay, so it's a great question. Why can't a melech overlook his kavod? Because he's also, what do we call Hashem? He's the melech malchei hamelachim, right? He's the king of kings. So there's a direct connection how we refer to it, how we relate to the king, lowercase k, as how we then by extension relate to the uppercase k. That's why, okay, among other reasons. Good question. Kavod amiti. So what is the true kavod? Eino ela yediat haTorah be'emet. Do what you're supposed to do. Learn Torah, act in an ethical way in life, serve Hashem. You know, we use in the paragraph before L'chadodi, we talk about kavod Hashem. Ela kavod hirim. We have the word kavod in there many times. And next time you say that paragraph, whether it's daily tilim or you say it on a Friday evening, take a look at the paragraph. Yeah. We stand for it. Yes, the custom is to stand for that paragraph too. That's correct. That's correct. Maybe very likely for that very reason. Correct. Why is standing?
Why does standing give kavod? Because it emphasizes that you're excuse the expression, a man, a human being who is erect.
Or okay. So the question is, why does stand? That's fine. Why does standing give kavod? So the straightest, quickest answer is mipnei sevat takum. It's a mitzvah in the Torah that says when you see someone elderly, old, passing by, you're supposed to stand up. It doesn't have to be molokum to. It doesn't have to be you have to stand up, but just just a little bit of a rise to stand up a little bit in order to show respect. Why? That is not unique to the Jewish people. Sorry? The malachim are standing, but they have one foot, so they really have a hard time. They don't have knees, I guess. Penguin have knees. That's the name of a book. But we right in the Torah we see that the idea is that when you stand up for somebody, right? Again, it's not unique to the Jewish people. When you know that it's a sign of respect when you stand up for someone who may walk into the room, who may be someone more
Animals can't stand erect.
Correct.
The same way we do.
That's correct. Animals cannot stand up. That's correct. Maybe it's to show a difference between us and the animal kingdom, potentially. Maybe so.
I wonder why it's more important to stand for a king than let's say a Chapt. Some of the kings, especially like in our history, they were really not.
Okay, so the question was, why is it more important to stand for a melech than a Talmid Chacham? So first of all, let's understand two things. Number one, you didn't just stand for a melech. For a melech, you had to do pishut yadayim v'raglayim, which meant literally prostrating yourself on the floor. You didn't stand. You would lie down on the floor, hands out, complete. We don't do that for anybody today. That's first of all. Second of all, Talmid Chacham, you're supposed to show mechalek kavod. You're supposed to stand for Talmid Chacham who walks by. Again, unless they are, no, just sit down. But you're supposed to.
I mean, it's just like, do you think of a true Talmid Chacham who doesn't run after kavod?
Right.
I think of a king that's kind of usually the type that, I don't know, does run after.
Okay, so to go back to one of your questions, we had a lot of lousy kings in our history, right? So was there a chiyuv to stand up for such a king, right? So that's a question that my initial answer is going to be no, but I have to back it up. So I have to first look into it. You're going to say something.
Yeah. If you're sitting,
yes.
Relaxed.
Yes.
Standing, you're ready to serve.
If you're sitting, you're more relaxed. When you're standing, you're ready to serve. Very good. Okay, I like that. It's a. You're also standing right. That's what I've said all along. Right. That's what I said a couple of weeks ago or last week when I talked about kavod. When I hate it when I walk in the room and someone will stand up. I don't like it, but I understand it that they're doing for what I represent. I hope what I represent. Right. So Right. So there's this concept of standing the whole dog. By the way, parenthetically, there's no halacha that says you have to stand for Chazrat Tashatz. It's a nice thing to do, but there's no halacha that says that you must. I've been asked that question over the years, so I like to clarify that. Furthermore, the Chachamim have told us, "En kavod ela Torah." True kavod is Torah. Shenemar kavod Chachamim min chalu. V'zulatah eno ela kavod bedumeh v'chozev. Honor, respect, without some Torah involvement to that, is just capricious, is fake, is false. Hevel ve'in bo mo'il. It's vanity. It's a waste. It's nothingness, and doesn't do anything. V'ra'ui hanaki linakot ulitaher mimenu tahara gemura ad yatzliach. And he has to really, one who wants to be naki, has to really cleanse himself of any of that vestige of desire to seek kavod, and then he'll be successful. Now, he makes a comment here at the end of the chapter, which I think we all need to hear. It's very important. We've just spent, 3 months on this chapter, at least, if not more. And I told you when we started, it's my favorite chapter, and it also has the most meaty chapter in the book. But it's also somewhat, it could be somewhat dejecting. Someone could say like, wow, I mean, that's really tough. Come on. As I told you last week, you ain't seen nothing yet, but that's okay. I don't want it to make you feel bad or down. So let's take a look at what he says in this paragraph. Until this point, I've included quite a bit of details for different ideas and mitzvot in this chapter for Nikiyut. And you can use this chapter as a model, as an avtipus, as a, what's the word? Paradigm. Thank you. Whereas I've heard people mispronounce it, paradigm. A paradigm, you could say paradigmatic, but you can't say paradigm. A paradigm for what it means to be naki. Yishma chacham yosif lekach, as it says in Mishlei, chacham should listen and take lesson. V'navon tachbulot yikneh, and someone who's wise will acquire it with tachbulot. Tachbulot are not just tricks. It has sometimes a negative connotation, but it means tachsisim, like tactics. How are you going to do it? It takes planning. We're going to talk about that in a minute. I can't deny. I love this line. He says, look, I'm not going to lie to you. It takes a little bit of it. It's not that easy, right? It takes a little effort to get to this point. Nevertheless, I still say, and the surface, it may seem very difficult. Right? Trust me, he says it's not that difficult. Listen to this line. This next line should guide you in millions of things, not just Nikiyut. Thinking about it, when you think about what needs to be done, sometimes you build up in your mind something that is really even more difficult than it's actually going to be. Let's say you have a project to do. I had recently a day where I was a little discombobulated. I had a lot of things on my mind. I had a lot of things to do. Some of them very, very small, but parts of a bigger puzzle. And I'm a person that makes lists. I like a list, but one that I can actually, like people say, I got my things on my to-do list today. It's 8 in the morning. I've already got 20 things done. What? It says, yeah, get up, check. Get off of bed, check. Wash my hands, check. Okay, no, you don't set the bar that low. Sorry. But when you think about what you have to do and you don't, and your mind's all over the place and you can't, it's like, oh my God, there's so much to do and I'm so overwhelmed. But when you start to organize it and you put it into smaller bits and you start to take action, oh, that wasn't so hard, right? Someone may sit down and do their taxes, right? On their own. I've never had someone do my taxes for me, which is whatever. Maybe that's why the IRS keeps calling me. Just joking. Not just joking. They don't call. They send letters. Yes, yeah, it's true. Yes. Which, by the way, getting a letter from the IRS 25 years ago was the basis of this book, The Three Images that I wrote, which is coming up, which is the book launch next week. So it's the first story in the book, actually. In any case, so let's say you have to sit down to your taxes. Okay, so let's just say you're in the United States. You need your 1040. I'm sorry, you need the 1040, and you need your W-2. So you need and if you have any deduction, you have to. Oh my God, there's so much I have to gather together, and all those receipts. But when you finally sit down to do it, you say, oh, that wasn't so bad. right? Now that's like that, not always, but it does happen in life sometimes where just the thinking about it sounds like it's absolutely overwhelming until you start doing it in tachlis, it's not so bad. You know, when I went last summer to the United States, was at the height of, well, it wasn't the height, but COVID was still pretty active, and we had to do the test. As you know, you had to take the test before you get on the plane. You had to take the test when you got back, and I am not a nervous flyer at all. I just don't like from the time I leave the house to the time I get to the gate. Anything in there I don't like. It's like, because it's just too much that could go wrong. But once I'm there, I'm fine. I actually like to fly. I like to travel. But I found myself so filled with anxiety. What if the paper I have that shows that I don't have COVID is the wrong date? What if they say, no, we don't accept this? And what happens while I'm in line, just to check in the luggage, the guy from El Al's coming by, oh, okay, literally 5 seconds, looks at it, checks, moves along. All that anxiety and that buildup of these literally hours. And even on the way to the airport, there's a form you had to fill out like within 24 hours before you left. And I couldn't get it filled out right. And I had the wrong thing. And I did that. Oh my God, what happens? Yeah, check. 10 seconds. It's all over. And I built it up in my mind as some massive thing. That's what he's saying here. Not just when it comes to the idea of nikiyut, but all these things in life that we build up and think and overthink to the point where it makes us filled with anxiety until you really start taking those first few steps. And he says that it's more difficult just this thought. Because once a person makes the decision that they want to be in this game, they want to be a Baal Midot, who, remember, Baal Midot means you rule over your Midot. You're Ben or Bat Torah, you're a child of the Torah because the Torah rules over you as the parent, and you're a Baal Midot. You are the one who rules over you, the master of your Midot, because only you can change them and only you can prevent forest fires. That came from, his gears of the Yankas are still way back here in the brain. Once you've done that, once you get used to it, it becomes a lot easier than you may have thought. Exactly what I just said. This is what something that truthfully said, that experience tells us this. Anyone who learns daf yomi, anyone who does something on a daily basis, anyone who exercises regularly, anyone who does something on a regular basis and does it for a long period of time will tell you that in the beginning, before you start, like, oh, okay, maybe I'll do it tomorrow. Why put off to tomorrow what I can put off till the day after tomorrow, right? The 1974 procrastinators meeting will be held next month, by the way. But once you make that decision and you take the plunge and you start, it moves. Did I tell you the story about the Shulchan Aruch, the page a day? I tell you this one? Okay. I think it fits. Because about 3 weeks ago for Shabbat, Andy and I were in Mitzpeh Yericho. Long story how we happen to know this family, it doesn't make a difference. Friday night, we daven at the yeshiva in Mitzpeh Yericho, a beautiful new building, absolutely gorgeous. And it's set up like a yeshiva, like here, the exact same thing in Birkat Moshe, with tables, and at the front of each table is a little spot for the guys who are sitting at the table, where they can leave some svarim standing up that they use during the week. And I sit down and I love svarim. And I see a book I've never seen before. So I pull it out and I look at it. And it is the following. It is set up in such a way that if you learn a page a day, 2 sides of a page a day, you will go through the entire 4 volumes of Shulchan Aruch in 1 year. It's great. You can go through all, I mean, I've learned a lot of halacha, but I've never gone beginning to end. I've learned La Yardeh, La Choshen Mishpat, but if I ever gone literally beginning to end, no. I said, you know what? Challenge accepted. So I noted after Shabbat the name of the book. I went online Sunday and I went to buy the book. And it's kind of a story within a story. I ordered it online, but I put it in my sal kniot, like your basket. And all of a sudden I didn't give my payment information. All of a sudden I get a message a day later, it's on its way. I said, how can it be on its way? I said, okay, there must be a mistake. And then I get a message, it's waiting for Machon Mikdash. Temple store. So I said, like, look, I really appreciate this. It's too bad I didn't order a whole shas, but I got to pay. So, oh, you didn't pay. So how your computer let it go through? I don't know. So I sent them money. Fine. Okay. So now I get the book, and it's set up in such a way that it starts with Rosh Hashanah. Aleph Tishrei, and every page says the date. I said, okay, I'm going to put it on the shelf. I'll start Rosh Hashanah. I literally said to myself, you idiot. You just hear what you just said. We are now in what Sivan, let's say Sivan, Tammuz, Av, Elul. You're going to wait 4 months. That's 120 pages you're going to be behind just because you want to start. It says Aleph Tishrei. So I put in the page, first page, the date I started. And I said, wow, because I kept saying, that's a lot. I mean, I do a number of things every day, and it's another thing I really want to do, but it's really a lot to do. No, just do it. So I sat down, I learned the first page, and it takes some time. And today I'm like 2 pages behind because of traveling and all. So I was catching up this morning. It's a lot. But once you get into it, like the Project 929, that Harry actually inspired me to, right? The learning a parak a day of Navi, 5 days, 6 days a week, 5 days, like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 5 days a week, and reviewing over Shabbat. Takes what, 4 years, 4.5 years to go through all of Tanakh. I've never gone cover to cover. I've learned a lot of it, but cover to cover, no, in order. So it's another thing. When you start out, oh my God, it's 929 chapters, but it's 1 chapter a day. It's 1 daf a day. It's 1 halakha a day. It's 1 whatever it is. So he's saying that this is so true in all of our lives that we picture in our minds that something is much more difficult than it really is until we start doing it. And I think it's very important for him to tell us this at this point, because the tone of the book shifts radically when we begin the next chapter. Actually, Parak Yud Gimel. I want to do first read Yud Bet, which is a very brief chapter, which is the way you acquire. Remember, his method in this whole book has been what the midah is, and then how you avoid tripping up, and how you can acquire the midah. So let's take a look at Yud Bet, and then I'll do a little bit of a segue into a topic before we get to Pre-Shoot, which is the next chapter, Yud Gimel. Parak Yud Bet, chapter 12. The way to acquire, or the means with which to acquire the midah of nikiyut, who had madat, it's just logical, right? It's just logical. What is it? You have to be very careful to read Divrei Chachamim Zichronam Livracha. You have to read words of Chazal. What does that mean? Im beinyanei halachot, v'im beinyanei musarim. You need to know halacha, and you need to know how to live an ethical life. If you don't know that you're not allowed to go through a red light, if you don't know that, then you're going to go through a red light, and it's going to cause damage, God forbid. If you don't know you're not allowed on Shabbat to separate peas and carrots, for example, unless you're doing it for someone who wants them, and you do it, you don't know the borer is asur on Shabbat, then you're going to mess up. So how are you supposed to know? If you don't know that ben adam l'chavero is done in such and such a way by learning Sifrei Musar, for example, and you don't know, and you're going to mess up. So what's the antidote? Just learn. Easier said than done. Once we already recognize the truth and veracity of the need for nikiyut, after we've already acquired the 2 main character traits of being watchful and being zariz, which we really don't translate. Just like we've learned about how to acquire these character traits, how to stay, things that might prevent us from acquiring them. After the first 2 chapters, the 2 main subjects, what else is there? You know what to do, you know what not to do. He says there are problems still. The only thing that remains is the ikuvim, those things that could stop us from growing. I know I have to keep Shabbat. I know I have to take challah. I know I have to, whatever it might be. But what are the pratim? In order to be careful with all of them. By the way, I got to tell you a crazy story about this book I just bought. About this one I mentioned, the Shulchan Aruch book. I've mentioned many times that it's happened to me literally hundreds and hundreds of times where I teach something, I learn something, I hear something, and that same day, that same topic comes up in a totally different way. And I mean, it happens to be constantly. So when I started the Halacha book, the Shulchan Aruch book, so I've learned Hilchot Tzitzit, I've learned it over time, but I don't remember the last time I actually opened the Shulchan Aruch specifically look at Hilchot Tzitzit. Fine, that happens to be one of the first things, Parak Gimel, or Daled, whatever, at the beginning, and I was learning that for that day. Close the book. literally, I close the book and I get a message from somebody. Rabbi, my tzitzit tore. I have 2 that are torn. What do I do? That was literally the last halakha I had just learned. Not one of them, the last halakha I had just learned. I said, cool. If I'd waited to Aleph, I mean, I knew the halakha, but if I waited to Aleph Tishrei, that would never happen, right? So that was cool. By the way, what's the answer? So if you have, there's 8, it's actually 4 strands. It's folded. You have 8 things, right? So if 2 are torn on the same side, you still technically, and they're not too short, you still are fine. But if you have one on one side and one on the other side of the knot, and one is way too short, then it's potentially the same string. So therefore, you should change your tzitzit. Okay. Therefore, you have to be a baki. You have to learn halacha. And by the way, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to know every single halacha. What does it mean? You have to know when there's a problem, when there's a question. You have to be aware that there's issues, and you call your local Orthodox rabbi. Okay, whether it's somebody in Efrat or Sweden or Malay Adumin, doesn't make a difference. If you don't know, you ask, and there's no reason to not ask. And if you want a different answer, you call your non-Orthodox rabbi. You have to realize how far-reaching the mitzvot really are. In other words, you don't forget that you keep Shabbat, but you might forget a subset of a category within Hilchot Shabbat, and therefore it's common to forget things. He's okay. He's not bothering me. You have to really spend time always learning. In order, those things that will really explain to you these minutia. In order that you should renew this in your memory. Therefore, and as a result, you will definitely remember to do them. We know it says, anyone who reviews halachot daily, he's a ben olam haba. Why? Because the more you know, the less you're likely to trip up. When you have willful ignorance, I don't know if that's a real phrase, but I just made it up. Yes, if you have willful ignorance, it's your own fault. I didn't know you can't go through a red light. No one ever told me, officer. Tough luck, Charlie. You can't drink a bottle of vodka and drive? Why not? Also, not just when it comes to halacha, but now when it comes to midot, you have to spend time learning. You have to learn books like Mesilat. Remember, Mesilat Yesharim did become popular for almost over 100 years after he wrote the book. They wanted to put him in Chayrim. They wanted to drive. They did. They drove the Ramchal out of town. But he says, remember that the father of the Muslim movement, the modern Muslim movement, is Rabbi Sol Salanter. Even many times, even a person knows they've decided that they want to be very careful. It's possible they'll become guilty, but means they'll get tripped up in the details. Because he didn't really try hard enough to know them, to understand them. A person is not born a genius. Remember, the Chavetz Chaim was not born the Chavetz Chaim. Little baby's born. Oh, look, it's so cute. It's little baby Chavetz Chaim. No, Einstein wasn't born Einstein, although he did have an advantage. His brain was much larger than the average human being. But you're not born. You have certain nitiyot. You have certain inclinations within a family. We talked about this last night in Tanya, actually. There may be certain nitiyot within a family towards genius, towards artistic activity, towards whatever it might be. But you still have to nurture, you still have to work on it. It's impossible to know everything. If you plan to wake up and learn and to know all there is to know, you will fail. That is for sure. I will tell you a short story before I continue. Try to see if it fits here. It does. I've told this story literally dozens of times over the many years I've had the opportunity after I've read it for the first time. And I feel it's important because it nogea lelev, it really touches the heart. There's a book called Codependent, no more. What's a codependent? A person who's in a relationship with an addict. And codependency, very briefly translated, could mean where the person who is involved with that individual somehow feeds that addiction, enables it, potentially. We're not talking about co-addict, codependency. And a woman named Melody Beatty wrote this book. And in the introduction to the book, she tells the following story. Now, very often, a person who's codependent, especially when they're in a relationship with a drug addict or an alcoholic, suffers physically, not just emotionally and mentally, but physically. So she tells the following story. A woman once heard about a guru on the top of a mountain who would be able to teach her everything she would ever possibly need to know. And she went up to the mountain, and the guru gave her a stack of books and said, go down the mountain and come back in 30 days after you read everything. And she comes back after 30 days and goes back up the mountain, and the guru says, do you know everything there is to know? She says, no, guru. And he takes a stick and he smacks her. He says, go down the mountain and learn again. And she goes for a few months and comes back after a few months up to the mountain. And he says, now do you know everything there is to know? And she says, no, guru. And he hits her again. And she says, go down the mountain and try again. It goes on for years. And finally, one day she comes up to the top of the mountain. And the guru says, now do you know everything there is to know? And she says, no, guru. And as he raises the stick to hit her, she reaches out and stops it. And he puts the stick down and says, congratulations, you've learned two things. Number one, you know now that you'll never know everything. And number two, you've learned how to stop the pain. It's a very powerful story. Very powerful. We often think about ourselves as being powerless in certain situations, that there's nothing we can do. We also think very often we can know everything there is to know about something. You can't. That's his point here. You can't know everything, but you need to know a lot of something. You really, and ignorance is not an excuse ever. I heard, who did I hear this from? I forgot. It says, you know, that let's say someone who's not religious. That's their choice. They're not religious. After 120 years, they come before Hashem. And Hashem said, you know, can you explain something to me? You ate bread 912,602 times. You didn't wash and you didn't bench. Can you explain to me why? He said, well, God, I wasn't on that program. Okay. What do you mean you weren't on that? That wasn't what I chose to do. What do you mean you didn't choose to do it? I mean, I'm adding this like, I'm God. Yeah, I know, but, right? When we choose to not do the mitzvah or whatever it is, or we choose to do the Aveirah, it's even worse, obviously, than choosing ignorance. But ignorance is still a very big, big problem when it comes to how you're supposed to conduct your life, and specifically when it comes to nikiyut, when it comes to trying to be naki from everything else. Let me read the last paragraph and then, good, then read a couple comments. Ve'omnam. Oh, did I finish the other paragraph? No. As long as you awaken your mind, you open your mind, he'll be careful and watch all the different sides of what's going on around him, meaning inside him as well. And he'll create, he'll invent I'm saying these are not his words, like a new reality for himself. What prevents you from reaching this besides, of course, not knowing? Well, that's it. All those things that we said already, like kanal, what we said already, when it comes to zehirut in the beginning of this book about being careful not to trip up, the same things apply here. In addition to that, is lack of knowledge, not spending the time to learn. I'm sure many of you know that the Shishat Sidrei Mishnah, the acrostic for the names of the 6 books is Zman Nakat. Zraim Moed Nashim Nezikin Kodashim Tarot. Zman Nakat, which is 2 words. Zman is time, Nakat is Aramaic for take. So it's a hint, take the time to learn. He says, and Am Haaretz, a boor, Cannot be a chassid. Again, a chassid here in this case, and we're going to see that even more in the next couple of few chapters, means someone who's pious. Someone who doesn't know, he can't do it. If you don't know, you don't do it. If I don't know, I have to fast on the 10th of Tishrei. I'm not going to fast. What do you mean you don't know? Okay, sorry. It says in Gemara and Kedushin that learning is great because it brings one to action. Okay, so first I'm going to close the book. I'm not going to do the text now, but I'm going to read something to you. I like how when I'm teaching, my phone blows up with all kinds of messages. Okay, where is this? Here. My own. There we go. I think as a conclusion to this first part of the book and an introduction to the next part, I think we need to hear the following. Even after all this encouragement, after all this divrei idud, what we should do, what we should stay away from, how to protect ourselves, gadol alai, it's still a pretty big request to try to do all these things. And I've made a comment already before that one need not finish one step before going to the next step. It's not like Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12-step program or others. This really can be done a little bit. But definitely you want to, there's something in AA or in recovery programs called two-stepping, where you jump a step because all of a sudden you're having this, you finish your first step and then you jump to the 12th, which is why you try to spread the message about what it means for recovery. All of a sudden he has this awakening, right? No, it's a process. But when it comes to here, you can try Zahirut, try Nikiyut, try Prishut, but it could still lead to a person to think a little bit about like, this is just so much. And I'm going to mess up. And by the way, I guarantee you 100% you will. There's no such thing as perfection. Of course you're going to mess up. So listen to this. There's a pasuk in Mishlei that some of you will be familiar with. Ki sheva yipol tzadik v'kam. 7 times a person will fall, the tzaddik gets up. Or, in spite of falling, he gets up and it makes him a tzaddik. I'm going to explain the difference. When a person has a nefila, they're messed up. I'm not talking about they didn't remember and they picked the peas out of the carrots. And I want to minimize that, but that's not as bad as some other things we might do in life. They fall. They have a nefila. They could stay down or they can get back up. When a person falls and gets back up, and a person falls and gets back up, one way of reading this pasuk is it turns that person into tzaddik. Why? Because they say, in spite of the fact, I'm a human being, in spite of the fact that I fell, I still want to continue trying to serve Hashem. The other way to learn this pasuk is that because I'm a tzaddik, I fall and I get back up. Because it's almost impossible to maintain 24/7 that level. But part of being a tzaddik is nefila. Part of that is having a fall. Now, because they have the word fall, I found something online. I translated it into English real quickly so I can read it. A woman Tamar somebody. Well, let me see if it's here, if it says who wrote it. I don't have it. I'll have to find out because I thought it was brilliant. I'm going to read something to you. I ran it through Google Translate because I didn't have the time to just read it and translate Toch Kedei because I didn't want to do that, and it's more or less good. So she quotes the pasuk of 7 will fall and the righteous will rise. Okay, a righteous person is called one who falls 7 times, and out of these falls he rises. Only a person who falls several times has the power to face trials. The cliched example that emerges is the reference to a baby who in his first year is trying to walk on his feet for the first time. He falls and gets up countless attempts, but continues to try with determination and finally, in a natural way, with the joy of success and with pride, acquires the basic skill of walking. When there's a change in habits in general and changes in eating habits in particular, there are falls. It is familiar, known, and sometimes even it can break us. How many times and how many diets have you tried and failed at? A fall is not surprising, but sometimes it is necessary. Rabbi Nachum from Breslov said, the descent is the purpose of the ascent, which in Hebrew we say aliyot, yeridot, not leman. Oh my gosh. not bishvil, but you go down in order to go back up. By the way, with that, if you think about it, if I want to throw something far, what do? I reach back, right? Because that's physics, like the amount of, you have to give the energy to get to expend that energy. So you go back, right? And you throw. You reach down into yourself, so to speak, you get that energy and you go. So part of the going is the nefila, is the going down. It says the upside says like this. Every fall is for the person of ascent. The fall is not an accident that happens, but part of the work and a stage that is even inseparable from the progress. The ups and downs indicate that there is a process of ascent that is alive and growing. Remember, if you don't fall, it means you didn't go up. Prolonged stability may indicate stagnation, which is why I'm adding into what she said here. What it says at the end of Kitisa, it says, the going up to the Mizbeach, there were no steps. It was a kevesh. There's a ramp. Why? Just have steps. Who cares? Wouldn't it be easier to have steps than a ramp? Because when it comes to steps, you can step up and you could stand still. You could plateau. You could be stagnant. But on a ramp, you're either going up or you're going backwards. And it's much easier to go backwards. You know that, right? So it's an indication that when it comes to trying to grow in Kedusha, you can't plateau. You can't stagnate. Think for a moment. I like this one. I love this one. Think for a moment about judo training. The belief among trainees is that the fall will inevitably come. From the beginning, the goal of the battle in competitive judo is to throw the opponent in different forms with a different score for each throw, with the highest score being ippon, a throw on the back. The judoka learns to not be afraid of the fall and not even to avoid it. In all the grueling and training, competitive athlete learns two main things. A, how to fall right without getting hurt, and B, not to concentrate on the fear of falling, but to succeed as quickly as possible in getting up from it and moving on. Imagine a grueling years of training to conduct a 4-minute battle in which you repeatedly practice how to fall right and not get hurt and get up and fast and to move on. It is worth adopting this approach, to think that the fall is not a decline, but is the art of knowing to get up fast as possible and move on. Worth learning from the judoka. Thought that was absolutely brilliant. Such a great insight that they know they're going to fall. It's not if, for sure. That's what I said. We are going to fall. Recognize that. Don't be dejected. Like if you've gone on a diet, it's a great example. You go on a diet and okay, after 2 weeks, you're doing great. You lost a couple of pounds or a kilo and a half, whatever it might be, and you messed up. Every single diet is going to tell you, move on. Go ahead, right? If you just, oh, there goes another diet. Oh, well, I'll try again next year. I'll wait till Aleph Tishrei, right? No. Part of the process is knowing that it's going to fall, but you have to know how to get back up. And part of that is knowing in advance, you may have Yuridot. So when you come to a parak like this, Nikiyut, or earlier ones, Zihirut and Zvizut, how am I supposed to do that? Okay, no one's expecting perfection. Remember, he said, only God is perfect. We can't be, because if we were, we'd be God. So I say that not just as encouragement for the last few chapters we've learned, but the upcoming chapters. Because I'll give you next week, Bezrat Hashem, when we meet, we're going to see that the next part of the book shifts into a radically more challenging approach, and it truly is meant for Yechidim. It's not meant for the masses, but we learn it, we read it, because number one, you never know what you can accomplish from there, and number two, you can even get just a little bit. You may sit in a class, forget this, you may sit in a class that's way, because hopefully it's not over your head. You may sit in a class that's way over your head, but you may pick up something that you can use. So why should you waste your time in that kind of class? Because you may walk away with something. So too here in the Prishut and Hasidut and Nikiyut, not Nikiyut, and Tahara, all these things, and there's some really very high bars that are being set in the next upcoming chapters. Don't give up, because even though it requires a lot of effort, you can always pick up a little something from it and use it in your lives. Have a great day. My pleasure.